Former President Barack Obama sitting down with his former staffers on this podcast that they have. But it's just unlistenable almost, but I suppose we must because people pay attention. Obama on the situation in the Middle East.
Yeah, he had to get involved. He couldn't be like other presidents and not say something. He had to insert himself.
Well, he's got deep thoughts on the topic.
Oh, yes.
And here are some of those deep thoughts.
And so if you want to solve the problem, then you have to take in the whole truth. And you then have to admit nobody's hands are clean, that all of us are complicit to some degree. I look at this and I think back, what could I have done during my presidency to move this forward as hard as I tried? I've got the scars to prove it. But there's a part of me that's still saying, well, was there something else I could have done? That's the conversation we should be having. Not just looking backwards, but looking forward. And that can't happen if we are confining ourselves to our outrage.
But confining ourselves to our outrage.
Gosh, is there anything else Barack Obama could have done when he was president for 8 years other than what he did? Well, I don't know. I mean, there are things he could have not done, like send $2 billion in cash on a midnight plane to Tehran, free up about another $100 billion in assets for the largest state sponsor of terror in the world. He could have not done that. He could have not drawn a red line in Syria that he was unable to defend. There's a lot of things he could have not done that he did in terms of destabilizing the region by butting up to Iran. I mean, it's just for starters. You know, if we're going to get into the whole truth business. For more on this and these geopolitical matters, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Jed Babbin. We haven't talked to Jed in a while. Former United States Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, contributor to the Washington Times and the American Spectator. Jed, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure.
Anything else the president, I mean, you know, he's got the scars to prove all that he tried to do to bring peace to the Middle East. We mentioned a couple of things perhaps he should not have done, but anything else on your hit list since he's in this reflective mode?
Well, I mean, he could not have gone to Cairo to give that speech in which he proclaimed that Islam has always been a part of the history of the United States. Going back to 1794, thereabouts, Islam was a part of the history of the United States. We had to go back and to war with the Barbary pirates because they were raiding American ships.
Yeah, TJ,
Yeah, TJ, I think it was 1803, rather. Yeah, TJ went over there, and, he ordered the first American fleet to be sent to chastise the Barbary pirates, and they did.
Well, he didn't recognize at the time, Thomas Jefferson, what Barack Obama recognized, which is that Islamo-fascists are just friends we haven't made yet. And if we could get some of these young men that are members of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Hamas, if we get them jobs, then everything would be hunky-dory.
Well, everything's going to be hunky-dory because a lot of those people are coming into the United States over Biden's open southern border, and Lord only knows the next terrorist attack against the United States, against us here, is on Biden's shoulders altogether. So, I think Obama once said that never underestimate Biden's power to F things up. And, I think he was right in that, if nothing else.
Well, I mean, there's some professional courtesies there. I mean, Obama, as we were just describing, had plenty of hand in messing things up here. So with respect to what the administration is doing and Republicans on the Hill, what is your view? The separating of the aid to Israel, is that the right play? The argument that Mitch McConnell is making, among some other Republicans, for a comprehensive aid package that contemplates Israel, that contemplates Ukraine, that contemplates Taiwan, that contemplates our border. What's your view?
Well, I think the question of a longer-term policy, which embraces Taiwan and Ukraine and Israel, that's for another day. I think what Speaker Johnson is doing is exactly the right thing, splitting off the Israeli aid and trying to get that through on its own because he's protecting his flanks. He's not making rookie errors. He's not trying to say, well, we have to have Ukraine aid too because there's enough people in his caucus who are not in favor of Ukraine aid at all. And what he's doing is also putting the pressure on Biden and trying to get Biden to have to say, well, as he's already said, Biden has already said he'd veto an Israeli aid bill standing alone. I don't think he'd have the guts to do that. And I don't think the American people, certainly the Democratic Party, would not appreciate that.
What's your view in terms of the cultural response so far? I mean, because the cultural response is partly a national security issue. I mean, certainly it's a domestic security issue when you have a Jewish gentleman murdered. The ruling was homicide, murdered at a pro-Palestinian rally in Los Angeles. You had a woman drive her car in Indiana into a school she thought to be a Jewish school. I mean, we seem to be revisiting some of our post 9/11 problems.
Well, I think we are, and it's very clear. It's worse than the response to 9/11 in many respects, because America is not united; it's divided, and it's divided along pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli lines. The anti-Semitism that's coming out among so many parts of the population right now is simply amazing to me. I mean, it's identifying with the terrorists. It's like Biden saying, well, we need a two-state solution, right? Okay, well, that denies the very fact that the Palestinians want to destroy Israel, not compromise with it. So there's a lot of evil going on. The Democrats are choosing evil right now. And there's a lot of people like Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and the rest of those idiots who are really propounding anti-Semitism and not really looking to the interests of the United States, not at all looking to the interests of the United States.
Do you think it's going to affect Biden's reelection? I mean, he had Rashida Tlaib saying, we're not going to vote for you, and there's so many Palestinian Americans who are like, I'm done with Biden. But who are they going to turn to?
I don't think they're going to turn to Trump. They're certainly not going to do that. And I think more importantly, a larger segment of the population, the Jewish people, are not going to give up on Biden because they've been voting for Democrats since Franklin Roosevelt, and they're pretty much enthralled to the Democratic Party. So it's just not going to be a good thing for the Republicans, and it should be. It could be. But right now, the Republicans can't seem to get out of their own way.
Yeah, I mean, you're right just in terms of the times. I mean, but it harkens back to that comment that Andrew Sullivan made a few years ago that we all live on a college campus now. And I say this in the context of the BDS movement, which was born on college campuses and flourishes still today on college campuses, boycott, divestment, and sanction. And in Philadelphia, you have the BDS movement promoting boycotts of Jewish restaurants, Jewish-owned restaurants. Yeah. It is becoming a cultural phenomenon that's no longer contained on campuses. We talk about the academics and we talk about the student groups that in some respects are funded by overseas money, which is another topic. But it is bleeding out into the larger culture.
Well, it is, and I want to take issue first off with Andrew Sullivan's remark. We don't all live on college campuses. I think we see an awful lot of employers, especially a lot of very high-class law firms, who are saying they're not going to recruit on these campuses who are just going all in for anti-Semitism. And I think there's a lot of reaction amongst the business community, and there's enough there to say college kids are college kids. They're entitled to be stupid, but there are limits. And right now, I think there's a cultural phenomenon. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, finish.
No, I think the cultural phenomenon that you're pointing out, the BDS movement, comes from the colleges, and it's simply based on what these kids are taught. Little highly, profoundly left-wing professors that lecture to them every single day. This is the kind of nonsense they're taught, and they're not taught the other side of the story, which is, quite frankly, a much better story and much more logical and much more compelling.
So where are you on the support for Ukraine? Is the proposition that's been argued by those on the right who favor continued support at the levels that have been proposed, so the next 60, 65 odd billion. Look, even if we're providing this level of funding for the next 5 to 10 years, it is a small price to pay to continue to impose real damage on Putin's army and disrupt this burgeoning Russia, Iran, China alliance. Is that your view, or should we start to be more skeptical of what our prospects are and what Ukraine's prospects are for repelling the Russians?
Well, I've been writing for a long time that we need a special inspector general to figure out where the heck the money is going and to root out the corruption in Ukraine. And Senator Josh Hawley just said something like that the other day. But that's where I am. I think we should have our aid to Ukraine, but it should be contingent on establishing a special inspector general with unlimited powers to investigate and subpoena and so forth. And that would make it would give us some assurance, which we do not have now, that our money is going the right place and not into other people's pockets.
What's your general assessment of our military preparedness when it comes to all of the dangers that are afoot, and the prospect that you have a larger regional war in the Middle East, the prospect of China's invasion of Taiwan, so on and so forth? What is our capacity while we're sort of focused on what we can project as the arsenal of democracy the world over?
I could talk for hours on that subject. Let me just say that it's dismal. We are not prepared. We're not prepared for war in Taiwan. We do not have, and we have not selected in the past 25 years, the right weapon systems. We have the F-35, which can't dogfight. It can't even be, turned out to fight and fly because it's not a reliable airplane. We've got the Stryker armored vehicle, which is not proof against RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades. And I sat 10, 15 years ago with the Army general who was the manager of the program, and I said, why the hell isn't this proof against RPGs? He said, oh, well, we're not going to send it anywhere where RPGs exist. Well, okay, RPGs are a fashion accessory in the Middle East. We have not made good decisions in procurement. We have not made good decisions in recruitment. We've got an awful lot of people. I don't want to take up the whole darn show, but I could talk to you about how wokeness is destroying our military and how our failure to recruit, which is a very, very serious problem throughout the services, is getting into an area where it's going to not be recoverable pretty soon.
Well, 25 years, so that spans many administrations, Republican and Democrat. So how did we get so far afield in terms of the weapon systems and making the right investments and procuring the right resources and so forth? I mean, would just like groupthink, institutional inertia in the wrong direction? What's going on?
All of the above, plus a lot of people who are not thinking like warriors think. You need to think when you're buying something. You don't need to think about, oh, well, is this really going to look cool? Or is it what the warrior really needs? Is it going to make the force? The only questions that the procurement people need to answer and military commanders need to answer, the only question is, does this improve lethality and readiness? That's the only questions that are relevant in terms of readiness and in terms of what we need to be doing with our military. Those are the only questions a military commander needs to answer to himself. And if he answers anything else, it's irrelevant.
And we haven't been asking those questions with
we have not.
With focus?
We have not. We have not been asking what the warrior needs. We have not been asking what the lethality and readiness is going to be benefited by or reduced by. Those are the questions that have not been answered probably for 30 years.
So is that the fault of the Pentagon, the fault of defense contractors, a combination? I mean, who's calling the shots here?
All of the above. Look, the Pentagon always wants something that's faster and cheaper. And the defense contractors always say, we'll get it to you faster and cheaper no matter how long it takes or how much it costs.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, but I mean, that's, this is something that has bubbled up to the surface, particularly the recruitment issue. So I think people are more generally aware of it, not to the level of detail that you have, but that also, speaks to even more concern about what we're spending and where our focus is when what you're describing is the reality about our preparedness.
Well, I mean, that's really the fact that we don't have people addressing this. I mean, back in the Reagan days, and yes, I'm an old guy, I remember that, we had a process called defense guidance. And what defense guidance did was to take the most recent and best intelligence we had and to look at what the capabilities were of our armed forces to meet the threats. And you develop a budget, a military budget, from the difference. You know, you need to retire what needs to be retired. You need to buy what's new, what's needed by the warrior, and everything else fell by the wayside. Right now, we don't have that process.
But isn't that what DARPA's for?
No. My friends at DARPA, the wild-eyed, crazy-haired scientists, they do a lot of things from their imagination, and God bless them, because they come up with a lot of weird stuff. I mean, this year they developed what they call a warp bubble, which, contrary to Einsteinian physics, apparently will allow travel at a speed greater than the speed of light. But these guys, you know, they use their imagination. We have planners, military planners who are supposed to be doing this, military budgeteers who are supposed to be figuring all this out, but they're not doing their job. They haven't for 30 years, and it's going to be, well, it already is a very critical problem in our military because we don't have the resources we need. We don't have the objects to fight that we need, and we certainly don't have the people we need.
Sobering. Jed Babbin, former U.S. Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, contributor to the Washington Times and the American Spectator. Jed, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Well, sorry to be depressing, but that's kind of, you know, if you want good news, call somebody else, man.
I understand.
We love your candor. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
When you get aggravated and the news has you down, when the reality of Americanism being subverted by traitors, enemies, both foreign and domestic, get to you. I go to